Hey everyone, welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Dave Riedel. My pronouns are he, him. I write about movies, and I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
My name is Evan Crean. My pronouns are he, him. I'm co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living.
Yeah, you are. And this week, Megan is off, so we have a very special guest joining us. Former Spoiler Piece Theater co-host, Kris Jenson.
Howdy.
a big introduction for himself there. Way to like I teed that right up and you were like, yeah, hey.
I would be like, yeah, sure am. Thanks. Hello, everybody. My name is Kris Jenson. I'm he, him, and I might sound familiar, I may not. Depends on how long you've been listening to the show. I'm a longtime former co-host.
That's true.
Yes.
I'm also a member of BOFCA. I'm currently on hiatus from reviewing new movies. My last published review was Zappa, which was a nice movie to have be the hiatus starter.
Because it was too much, or because you were like, oh, I enjoyed this and scene?
Well, because I was like, there came a point where I was like, I decided in the context of 2020, hey, I don't want to get in any more fights about Marvel movies. And and that's just so much of the gig. And obviously, I don't complaining about getting paid to tell people what you think is a treat. But it's also like, I just tried to think about going back to it. And, because there was no Marvel movies in 2020. Anyway, I was like, it's just a movie about something that I'm interested in. And it was like a companion to the real Frank Zappa book, which I was a big fan of, his not autobiography.
Right.
Kind of like just sort of freewheeling. And it was like a compliment to that. You read the book and watch the movie, like one or the other, like 2001 or something.
Yeah.
So, it was just a nice one to be my last like new release review.
That is cool. And I should just mention, you knew that you probably forgot, but I had given money to the Kickstarter and I have the poster framed behind me in my dining room. So
that's right. Yes. I remember when you gave the money and like, wasn't one of the potential prizes like his house or something? Or house?
you could buy the house, which I think, I don't think she did it for the Kickstarter, but Lady Gaga bought the recording studio for sure. I don't know if she bought the whole house.
All right, good. Well, I trust her with that. I think she understood.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, introductions complete. We will tell you what we're watching this week. First of all, Kris, it's great to have you back. Second of all, we're watching Encounter and Silent Night, which two movies with such innocuous names, which are not innocuous movies.
No, unfortunately. I was just thinking, poor Kris, he's been on hiatus from reviewing new movies, and we bring him back for this.
And you bring him back for these two? Oh,
yeah.
Son of a bitch.
They sounded so good on paper. That's the thing, too. I was like thinking as we were planning for the shows, like, oh, Kris will come on, and these sound like they could be interesting. They'll be fun to talk about. Well, and I'm sure we'll have fun talking about them.
When you said Silent Night, it's like, did they remake that too? Because this isn't the only movie called Silent Night.
Right.
Right.
And Encounter, no, that's The Arrival. That's the Charlie Sheen one.
Right. Okay. Right. Well, I think, let's talk about the movies. By the way, listeners, if you only come on to the show to find out how we feel about the movies, you can stop the show now because we just gave it all away. But anyway, so let's start with Encounter. It's directed by Michael Pierce, written by Joe Barton and Michael Pierce, starring Riz Ahmed and Rory Cochrane and Octavia Spencer, who has a larger role than Rory Cochrane, so I should have said her name first. But anyway, here's the one-liner from IMDb. Two brothers embark on a journey with their father, who is trying to protect them from an alien threat. That's kind of true.
I understand why they lead with that, but like, I would feel ripped off. I was like, oh, I'll check that out. And then I saw this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Quality of the movie aside, it's also misleading for the emotional journey you're about to go on. If you are invested in it, there's real stuff in it. If it touches on something that's personally affected you, it may be there may be some honesty to it, although I feel like there's a dishonest resolution.
Yes.
Oh, for sure.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, anyway, so it's even if you got invested in, I think you would want to know what this movie's about before you saw it.
Yeah.
You don't want to see father and sons fight aliens. Or you don't want to see this movie.
Right.
And that's why we're here, guys.
That's
to spoil
the purpose
movies.
of spoiler piece. So there are no alien fights in this movie. I mean, except in Riz Ahmed's head. Because I don't know, there's no real explanation for why he's having this break. They don't even really label it. But basically, he thinks that microorganisms have landed on Earth. He's having visions that some kind of comet or projectile or something has landed on Earth. It has released these microorganisms, and when they get into your body, you become they're parasites, and you become their host, and you're yourself, but you're behaving as the aliens want you to, which is an interesting idea until the holes start to. This is one of those movies that pisses me off because we were talking about dishonest resolutions. This is one of those movies where you have an unreliable narrator, but the movie wants you to think he's reliable. It's not, you're over on the Patreon. We talk about Total Recall this week. Hey, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, not the one with Colin Farrell. And that movie, we talked about the intention behind it. And I think that the intention behind Encounter is really muddled. I don't think it knows what it is, because this is kind of a serious subject that it's taking on with sort of it's treating it seriously, but at the same time, it's also just like, hey, this guy's nuts, Right. I mean,
yeah, it's kind of cavalier.
Yes.
This movie was really disappointing to me because it sounded interesting based on the summary. And I was even interested in it for the opening few minutes when we see the very detailed, Dave, I think you described it as icky or yucky opening, where we're seeing like insects come and we see like the inside perspective of someone bitten by a mosquito and releasing some kind of pathogen into their blood. And it's like very detailed. And I was like, okay, this movie is going to take me on this like really hyper detailed look at how these body snatcher aliens work, and I'm about it, and it's really cool. But then it reveals so early in the movie that all this stuff is in Riz Ahmed's head, and so you're just like, why am I still watching this?
Yeah, and it basically becomes a father has kidnapped his children story, which is not a story I want to watch. And also, it doesn't help that both movies this week, and we'll get to Silent Night in a minute, but both movies this week have the most annoying children characters I think I've ever seen. It's a tie. It's a tie. There are two brothers in this movie, Riz Ahmed's children. They're 10 and 8. And first of all, I don't know what the personal lives are of the filmmakers, but that is not how an 8-year-old behaves. That 8-year-old behaves like a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old.
I did not realize they were supposed to be 10 and 8. That's a surprise to me.
Yeah.
If they said that, I missed it. And I assumed they were going for like 10 or 11 and 5.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't even look like he's 8. He's smaller. It's such poor casting, and it's poor writing because not once, not twice, but 3 times they have this kid run away from his dad and his brother. 3 times. 3 times in the same movie. And, that's just fucking lazy, because then you can just, one time he runs off and his dad catches him. The second time he runs off and I don't remember what happens. And the third time he runs off, he gets kidnapped, he's kidnapped by his father, and then he's kidnapped by these 2 like wannabe militia guys.
Right. These white vigilante guys.
Yeah. Who have, are seeking vengeance against Riz Ahmed because he assaulted their father because he thought their father was an alien, and then he stole their father's car, which, I could get into the whole plot of how that ends up, but basically it's not really important. Chris, I would love to know what you thought of this.
Like I said, dishonest ending, which I think we'll get to in a second. I started coming up with a unified theory, which I don't know if I stand by it yet, but I will. Well, 2 of them.
Like string theory?
Sure. Well, so I have 2 related to this movie. One is I've always said about Denzel Washington that he makes bad movies good and good movies great just by being in them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's true of Riz Ahmed, but it always makes me want to. I will always watch a movie with him in it, whether it's good or bad. So there's that. There's something about him that makes me want to watch a movie, and it's not the Denzel Washington quality yet. Maybe it'll get there. I trust him. I trust that he's giving something to it.
Yeah.
That I want to see. Whether the movie works, I want to see what he's doing.
Yeah.
The second one is, again, this is a work in progress, but if there's a lot of time spent in a car, how much time in those cars are the characters just talking? And I think the higher the ratio, the more likely the movie was not fully thought out before it was greenlit. And then you're left scrambling. There are exceptions, of course. There's like National Lampoon Vacation or something, or Little Miss Sunshine, where there's like a thought to what happens when all these people are caught together. But then there's the like Tomorrowland or Kin, or where you're just like watching them go somewhere and nothing in particular is happening while they're doing that. That to me is evidence rather than a cause of its badness, but I think it's evidence that it didn't know what it was going for. And then the ending proved it. When it's so long story short, I think we'll flesh out the bigger story in a second, but like it becomes clear that he has kidnapped his kids instead of protecting them from the aliens. And then Octavia Spencer is working with the FBI, and Rory Cochrane, I think he's a profiler or something like that.
Yeah.
And he checks a lot of boxes for what they call a family annihilator.
I looked that up. That's a real term.
I totally believe it. Like Rory Cochrane, I think that subplot adds up. I don't know what the movie's opinion of the FBI is. This guy who just sort of, this other guy, I guess he's his partner, who just looks angry and sarcastic all the time. I don't know what the movie's trying to say about the FBI. It felt like it was like, it cast this guy to look this way and had nothing to say about the dynamic.
Yeah. And then you have Rory Cochrane, who I felt is in a different movie from everyone else.
I thought he was awesome. I thought he was great.
Exactly. He's great. What the hell is he doing in this movie? What is this character doing in this movie?
So, and I was thinking like, interesting, this movie will have sympathy for somebody who doesn't know what it is that they're going through and is incapable of knowing what it's doing to other people. Like, that's bold. That was my thought when that started to happen. I was a little bored of the movie, but I thought the gears might change. But then Riz Ahmed is just sorry, and then it stops. Like, whatever episode he's going through stops. And then he's just angry. Then at the end, it's just angry. He seems to already know that it's not real, even though we see him knowing it's real at the beginning. And then the ending is everybody lives in hugs.
Well, you cut away before the FBI shoots either of them, so who knows? But
but it's not done in this like ambiguous way.
That's true. I think you're right. I think that he it's a hug, but he is going to be arrested and go to prison for the rest of his life.
But they know he's unarmed and he's hugging his kids, so they're not going to shoot. So my takeaway is that they took him in alive.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
But like he just stops. He stops the. They Octavia Spencer says it's probably an undiagnosed hallucinatory something like that, some kind of break tied to his time in the military, which ends up being part of his fantasy that he's covert against these bugs.
Yeah,
bugs are everywhere. That's mentioned when she meets with one of his old Marine buddies. They were pinned down somewhere where there are tons of bugs, and so that's part of his like hallucination. But yeah, they don't really spend any time explaining the PTSD or even giving you any flashbacks to indicate how this happened to him, which can be frustrating. But to get back to the ending, one of the things that made me extremely uncomfortable was how palpable the sense was that when the kid had the gun, there was the white police officer who seemed really excited to murder him. Like he was just so geared up to shoot this kid because he had a gun. And it jumped off the screen at me. Like it just was so palpable in this moment of like, making some type of comment about, cops and racism. And I was like, it just feels like not the place to be doing this, and not this strongly. It was just,
it didn't earn it, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, you can't have a movie that's about a father kidnapping his sons and the father may or may not be having some kind of mental health episode, and then throw in the very realistic FBI. And I agree with you. I feel like it was, whether they meant it to be or not, it reads like a comment on cops being racist, which cops are racist.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, to me, I mean, I'm just sitting there as a dad going, don't shoot the kid, don't shoot the kid, don't shoot the kid. Because, that would be, I mean, you would take a mediocre to poor movie and just make it the worst movie ever made if that happened. But it really felt, that whole tense send-off felt really unearned. All the kid had to do, and he's a smart kid. The whole movie, he's shown to be a really smart, resourceful kid. And then the one time he does something stupid, it's when 75 guys with, AKs are pointed at him. I mean, just good God. So,
yeah.
I thought maybe it might be trying to suggest, so Octavia Spencer and Rory Cochrane, I think, are people who care about what happens to people who are working in a system that doesn't. I felt like that's who their characters were, and those are the people that they were playing. Like that's the work they were putting into it.
Yeah.
But the movie didn't know how to employ it.
For sure.
So you end up with less than a point.
Yeah.
So on the money with that comment, Chris. they really do. They really do seem to actually care and want this situation to resolve with no loss of life. But everyone else around them seems to be working really hard against that.
Really hard to kill Riz Ahmed and maybe his kid.
These I don't know what the name of the biker gang is, or the movement that these guys are part of. That was another dead end road.
The dad and then his two militia kids.
Yeah, they have the patches, and that was another thing. Like, they're there. This guy, the people who made this movie know who they are, but why?
Yeah.
Again, it's a very intentional choice. They used real symbolism instead of saying he's just a general anti-government dude.
Right. We should round this out and say that Riz Ahmed has this Jeep that gets a flat tire, so he has to steal another car, and he goes into this very don't tread on me property, and he finds a car. He goes into this trailer, which is this guy's house. There's a militia member guy, older, probably in his mid-60s, pointing a shotgun at him, and Riz Ahmed thinks he's an alien because he's still having whatever you want to call this episode. Fight ensues. He whacks the dad in the head he gets shot in the gut with a shotgun at close range. I don't know if the wound would be that easy to repair as he does later, but I have never been shot with a shotgun, so what do I know? And then the guy's adult children find him, and then they go find Riz Ahmed and his kids and basically turn the whole thing into a shooting spree. And because conveniently Riz Ahmed was in the Marines, he is able to shoot one. I thought he killed the guy. It turns out he had some kind of vest or flak jacket on, because you see him like perfectly coherent and, handcuffed to a light pole later. And then he disarms the other guy after running over him with his car. And it's this very strange, it's another sort of, is this a commentary on racism, because so many of the militia people that we've come to know in the news anyway are racists? Or is it just that they needed people who are, quote, crazy, unquote, so that Riz Ahmed has a reason to shoot them? I mean, it was so, everything's muddled. This is a really muddled screenplay.
Yeah. He handles the situation with remarkable calm, and the fact that he doesn't kill them and just ties them up, I think, says something. After situations where he had kind of left people for dead. Like,
and that's where the movie can't decide if he has PTSD, how his mental, what he's going through ties into his PTSD. That's what I think the movie, it turns into that all he's been doing is trying to get back to his old the guy he served with said like it was the one thing he was, or somebody said it was the one thing he was good at was being a Marine.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, you know, he's like, this is more familiar than anything else. It's one of those stories where like I can't readjust to life. Oh, he was in jail.
Right.
He was in jail too. And so like, what is this character? What are you trying to say? You're trying to make somebody who is who's been through everything, and what he ends up is not a consequence of what he's been through.
Mm-hmm.
So like he's able to, he is able to snap back into combat mode, which I understand is a real thing for people who come back and can't readjust when there's a situation. It's like, then they know exactly what to do. They feel out of place otherwise, but now so that made sense. But that doesn't make sense with his hallucinations or the way he's disconnecting from reality. And especially what happens next doesn't make sense.
Right.
You mean when he's in the bathroom and he sees the organisms in his body and then he's just like, no, you're not there. And then they're not there.
Yeah. And then he ends up just on a chase with the cops, like where he wants the cops to take him out. Again, that would be real if it weren't for the whole movie leading up to it.
Yeah.
Right. I think, Kris, you were starting to hit on something that bothered me. The movie places you in a really difficult position where they present this kind of dichotomy with this character where it's, on the one hand, you talked earlier about they want you to feel some amount of sympathy for him, of like PTSD and whatever mental health situation he has going on. And like, you know, so he's doing all these things that he doesn't mean necessarily because of what's going on with PTSD and hallucinations, but he's also legitimately placing his children in many dangerous situations where you like look at it and you're like, this guy is really bad dad, and he's putting his kids in like life and death scenarios where they can easily die. And so it's this like really uncomfortable place where you have to be like, I want to feel some sympathy toward him, but also he's really dangerous and unhinged, and like I can't believe that he's like our protagonist in this movie.
And that's where Rory Cochrane, I think, is misused. Like he makes some really great observations and condenses them in a way that Octavia Spencer is like, I get immediately what you're trying to say. The things about like, you know, a lot of the people who are the family annihilators are loving dads from the point of view of everybody else. And so that's what I thought the movie was like, depicting somebody who doesn't know what they're going through. That's interesting. That's something worth exploring. Somebody who can't understand that what they're seeing isn't real.
Kind of like Total Recall. Sorry.
Sure. Like it's just something that makes it go like that. You have. I thought I was going to be watching a bold movie. And when Rory Cochrane had that conversation.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and I'm sorry if I interrupted you and my interruption threw you off track. But what I wanted to mention also before I forget is that it's really, really easy to make the stakes higher and cheaply when you put children in danger.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this movie really is, I mean, I don't want to use the word cheap because I don't think it's like, usually when I say cheap, I also mean stupid. And I don't think this is stupid. I just think it's not thought out well. It's like they had these disparate elements that they tried to Frankenstein into one story that doesn't really work. Or if it was going to work, they needed to spend another 6 months on it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
that's my guess about the car ride. You know, it's like, why do they spend so much time talking in the car? Because it wasn't finished. It wasn't ready to go into production.
Yeah.
I can't think of one movie. And it's been a long time since I've seen it. A Perfect World.
Oh, yeah.
That is a movie that involves abduction, lots of talking in a car. How is this going to end? This might be bad. That's complete. And it's really long. And it's really watchable. And it's really thoughtful. And it's interesting. And it's good. And knows how to treat, like, you know, understanding what somebody's going through without justifying their actions. This movie has a difficult relationship with justifying actions versus empathizing or giving somebody a chance. That this person had a tough time, and so therefore you can kind of understand what they're doing, right? That's not the same thing as feeling empathy for somebody who can't control their thoughts and emotions.
All true.
Couldn't have said it better myself once again.
I'm just of
Chris,
marveling at how inarticulate I am. I'm sorry. I don't mean to turn this into the Dave show to say that, wow, Chris is so good that I feel like a moron, but that's basically what's happening. So, but I think you hit it. I think you both hit it, Evan, when you were talking about the ending, and then Chris just talking about how it feels like it feels like an unfinished product that they had to go ahead and make anyway. Mm-hmm. I'm paraphrasing your very eloquent thoughts.
Here's an extremely small nitpick.
Oh,
when they're listening to the radio and Slayer comes on, and the kids are like, "Oh, what's this? We like K-pop," which it was supposed. I don't know. Maybe that's funny to somebody who has kids who listen to stuff that's like, I don't
like
understand
K-pop. So
you're like, sure. I mean, I'm just talking about like this disconnect between like what I like, but it's like heavy metal, and then he says like 3 bands that aren't Slayer.
Right.
It's like it's Slayer playing on the radio. Why wouldn't you say it's Slayer? Why would you say heavy metal, Guns N' Roses, Metallica, but it's Slayer playing on the radio?
I don't think I'd ever describe Guns N' Roses as heavy metal either. So
not when I'm listening to thrash. With thrash metals on the radio, I'm trying to explain heavy metal to a kid. I wouldn't say Guns N' Roses.
Right.
It's adjacent. There's a relationship between heavy metal and Guns N' Roses, but like not thrash. There's no overlap.
Yeah.
In thrash metal.
Yeah. I mean, and also choosing Metallica. Well, he says Megadeth, which is, I mean, they've stayed pretty consistent over the years, but Metallica until 1988. Haven't you ever listened to And Justice for All, but nothing after it? Anyway.
Yeah, come on, you 8-year-old kid. Like
but I mean,
80s,
yeah. My biggest gripe, though, about this movie is that whoever wrote it doesn't know how children operate. I mean, they get the 10-year-old kind of right, but the little brother is just so far away from what an 8-year-old is like. It's like it's like they've only watched movies about kids. Didn't you used to say, Chris, that I might be attributing this to you and it's someone else, but like you used to say that sometimes you felt like this is what an alien who has only observed humans would do if it wrote a screenplay. It wouldn't know how human emotions worked.
I've said things like that before. Kind of.
Yeah. I kind of feel like this guy whoever wrote this has been around 8-year-olds, but isn't quite sure how they operate. Watch me find out that this guy's got like 8-year-old triplets, the director, but whatever.
I mean, it could be that, and so therefore kids are too dear in order to actually write a dangerous situation for them. It could be one of those as well. It's the things in the bowling lanes, but just in a violent movie. Also, there's so many bullets fired and nobody dies. That also tells me this is a movie that's hedging its bets so much.
Especially that one bullet that goes through the back window in the Jeep, which I wasn't quite the way it was filmed. I wasn't quite sure it actually went through the Jeep's back window until like 40 minutes later when you see a bullet hole in the glass and you're like, oh no, it did go through the window. Nice editing, by the way.
People getting shot and or any kind of injury. The little kid, that huge head injury has no effect.
Oh yeah, that's a concussion.
I know little kids get banged up, but that is not a banged up thing.
Yeah, when you add a sound effect to somebody's head hitting the pavement, it's not a simple injury.
The one detail I noticed here is that it was co-written by Joe Barton, who wrote The Ritual. Did you see The Ritual? That's the one about in England where they go in the woods and there's this like cult and this god that's made of like arms that forms like an animal. It's pretty cool.
No, I haven't seen
I do
that,
recommend
but it sounds cool.
It's it's not a slow movie, but it is the movie of watching somebody slowly realize, like a rational person realize the situation they're in. So it's not like it doesn't tease you with stuff. It's just like they're entering a situation that's maybe a little bigger that they can't brush it off, and then they start to see this unfold, and then they accept what it is they're up against. It's that kind of movie. Horror movies in the woods, I know, can get exhausting. But this one is good. It's well paced. It looks good. Good actors, tight but ambitious. And I wonder what his relationship is to this movie, because Michael Pearce co-wrote it and directed it. This appears to be his first feature film.
Yeah.
Where did this start as a PTSD movie? Did it start as a mental health movie? Did it start as a road trip movie? Did it start as an alien invasion movie?
Yeah, I don't think they wrote it as a team, right? I think there's an "and" in there. So, if memory serves, which doesn't imply, it means that you have one writer and then you have another writer, not a team of writers. So,
right. I did not make note of that, but that would inform something about it.
Yeah. Well, have we talked Encounter to death?
I think we might have.
Yeah. Kris, do you have any final thoughts?
I hope we've convinced you not to watch it if it looked appealing to you.
I second that heartily.
There's no agree to disagree on this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Agree to agree on that sentiment. So, final movie of the evening. It was a smaller week for Spoiler Piece as far as movies go. We have Silent Night, which sounds like it would be a horror movie, and it kind of is, sort of, a little bit.
More sci-fi, I would say.
Yeah, sci-fi. Anyway, here's your one sentence. Written and directed by Camille Griffin, starring Keira Knightley, Matthew Goode. Where's he been? Annabelle Wallis and other.
The Crown, I think.
Oh, yeah. And other English people you will recognize if you watch English TV or English movies. Here's your one sentence IMDb. Neil Simon and their son Art are ready to welcome Nell. Sorry, her name's Nell, not Neil. Nell Simon and their son Art are ready to
Saving
welcome
Silverman
friends.
Sequel. Yeah.
Yeah. Ready to welcome friends and family for what promises to be a perfect Christmas gathering. Perfect except for one thing. Everyone is going to die. That is the most accurate summary I've read in a long time on the old IMDb.
I apologize. Neil Diamond was Saving Silverman, not Neil Simon. We just sort of cascaded mistakes and on top of each other.
Well,
I mean, Silent Night is kind of a mistake. Hey-o! So, man, is this movie not good?
Yeah. I was going to say, I seem to remember a really great summary that came with the screener, too, that made the movie sound a lot more enticing than it actually was.
Do you remember what it was?
It just talked up the idea of, like, people knowing that they're going to die, and then, like, what happens, like, what kind of conversations can you have, what secrets and things and situations, and it's like, yeah, that sounds like it's going to be a really good movie.
It talked up the Britishness of it. It said, like, stiff upper lip. So
yeah, that's right.
It seemed to be about there may be a specifically British dimension of this that British audiences will appreciate, but I feel like I'm a little plugged into those kinds of conversations, and I did not feel that this contributed to it, or was it all enlightening about British society, class, those sorts of tensions?
Certainly not class. I mean, that you've got this rich family with rich friends, and they're sort of talking in circles about how the poor people will suffer from this. Well, anyway, let me just explain real quick more than the IMDb summary says. So what happens is, I'm not really sure how they predict exactly when this is going to happen, but basically climate change has produced a cloud of poison that is going over the planet. And they have determined that it will hit England, the part of England they're in, wherever they are, on Christmas Day, sometime in the early morning. And so the British government has given everybody who is not, as Matthew Goode says, an illegal immigrant or homeless. Was that the other contingent of people? Given everybody who's not, in his words, an illegal immigrant or homeless, a suicide pill, basically, that will kill them within 5 minutes so they don't have to suffer the effects of the poison, which will slowly turn their innards into jelly over the course of about 3 weeks, and they will die in horrible, tormenting pain, which is kind of a weird thing to be putting in a movie, which is basically, except for the end of the world part, Peter's Friends or Return of the Secaucus 7 or The Big Chill. You know, I mean, I think aside from the sci-fi component, I don't really think this movie had one original idea. And it also had the worst child character in a movie that's not the movie Encounter that I have seen all year. Like, I think I sent a text to Evan that said, if he hadn't run out into the poison cloud himself, I would have had a hard time not throwing him into it, you know? Which is really unkind. And I don't know. What did you all think about this?
I was going to say, I think this movie's biggest problem probably is that it struggles with tone. There are points where it attempts to be comedy and dark humor, and I don't think it really lands. And so you have moments, weird comedic moments that feel out of place in an otherwise, I think, fairly serious movie that I think has some good ideas or some good fodder for intellectual debate or conversation or situations for these characters to interact in. Like the idea that they know they're going to die, so like, do they take the pill and die, or do they wait and see what happens because maybe somebody made a mistake, maybe it's not going to kill them? Like, I think that is a really interesting scenario, and I just was so bummed that it struggled to find footing with some like strange comedic moments in an otherwise, I think, serious movie.
I think the good ideas were, I liked the idea of, they quote Greta a couple times near the beginning, the climate activist from Sweden.
Yeah.
I liked the idea. I hated the way it happened, but I loved the idea of, in one day, the last day, you have to convince a conversation between a kid and parents about why anything is worth it if you can't change anything. And a kid who's just old enough to know that conflict. And it's immediate. The result is immediate. It's not hypothetical, oh, you'll understand when you're older, because the parents know that you won't. And, the idea of like clinging to structure and tradition and meaning when none of it is about to matter. Those are the ideas that I think are worth exploring. This movie had already lost me before the very end. And then the very end was, I don't know, the nail in the coffin, let's call it that. Where like
it was maddening is what it was.
Yeah. What I thought was like, instead of a point, this movie has a twist. And I was like, ooh, I'm going to keep that.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what it was trying to accomplish. Is it like, oh, the poison cloud passed, now everything's fine?
Right.
I mean, is that
so therefore what?
Yeah. So therefore Art is alone, poisoned, and will die in roughly 3 weeks in the house because, of course, he runs out into the poison. I mean, so
this kid's running away. Yeah. No.
I didn't really, aside from the brief thing. So Nell is Keira Knightley, and her husband, whose name I've forgotten already. Don't tell me it's
Simon.
I was going to say Simon because of Neil Simon.
Neil Simon.
His name is Simon. Of course it is, because he's
her husband, Neil Diamond.
They are having a gathering of all of their friends, and if their friends have kids, their kids, to come over, and then they're all going to take their pills and die at the same time. But then you have this kind of, you were talking about the humor that doesn't land, Evan. Annabelle Wallis playing a character a million miles away from her character in Malignant, by the way.
Right.
She's sort of the comic relief along with Lucy Punch a little bit. But she's just this kind of grating, she's got this daughter who doesn't like her, but she treats her daughter like shit. So you know why her daughter doesn't like her, but it's just like, it's uncomfortable and kind of dumb. And then Lucy Punch has a partner, Kirby Hal Baptiste, who's her partner's name is Alex. And she gets so drunk that she falls asleep before she can take the pill. And then Lucy Punch puts the pill in her mouth and gets her to swallow it while she's passed out, but then she gets up and throws up because she's drunk, and then she stabs her to death.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, that's got to be painful. I'm just throwing that out there.
Right. Yeah. Lucy Punch is pissed because she took the pill and now it's too late for her. So she stabs.
Yeah.
Also,
Kirby
not to
Hal
nitpick,
Baptiste.
but that wouldn't be immediately fatal. But
no,
it
wouldn't. Unless she got her in the spleen, then it would be fatal, but I don't think it was high enough. And so then you have a good chunk of the last third of the movie with Keira Knightley and Matthew Goode trying to convince their son Art, who is having some sort of existential crisis about taking the pill. And it's just the points he's raising are good points, and he's written as a smart kid, so it seems like the kind of thing that he would come up with. But also, it's just like, then, you know, the dichotomy of kids, then he becomes like a little shit kid and like runs out into the wilderness to like run away from everything. And then he finds a dead family in a car that's taken their pills. And then the poison cloud hits him. And then the wind direction changes so it doesn't hit Matthew Goode, his father. And then you just see him, like, first of all, having kind of a, I don't even know what you would call it, a freak out. And then, of course, he's having convulsions because the poison has gotten him, which, by the way, is one of the most uncomfortable things I have seen in a movie in a long time, is the very long scene where the camera tracks up from the bottom of his bed to his body, where he is convulsing in his bed, clearly having been poisoned, but everybody else is so involved in their own shit, they don't know that's what's happened to him.
See, and I think that would have been really amazing, or could have been a more amazing moment. This idea that everyone, his parents are so determined that he take the pill and they all die together that they're completely ignoring him while he's dying. And so he ends up dying alone.
Yeah.
But then he wasn't quite dead yet. And so like they bring him into the bedroom with the other two kids. And there's this whole to-do about how they need to have their cold Coca-Cola, which, hey, you know what? You're dying. You get your dying wish. If you want your ice and your Coke, have your ice and your Coke. But in the meantime, Art is dead and they don't realize it. And so they're just kind of like, oh, well, all right.
Yeah.
I guess we'll take our pills. And then meanwhile, around the house, everyone's like, oh, crap, I forgot to say goodbye to, my best friends or whatever before I took the pill. Oops, too late.
Yeah. And then there's this whole subplot about whether Lily Rose Depp, who has learned she's pregnant, is going to take the pill or not. And the whole time I'm watching that, I'm going, I think spare yourself. And if you're the kind of person who believes the fetus has feelings, spare it the 3 weeks of torture of you dying while your insides turned to mush, and take the fucking pill. But that's a whole subplot. Ay.
Right.
What up?
And Art ends up crashing into that subplot because he finds out, and then he's like, well, I'm going to not take the pill and I'll be with her and we'll die together. So at least she doesn't have to die alone.
Yeah. Crashing is a good way to put it, because that's sort of like, yes, to be snarky. And then also it is a good way to put it, because this, you see the kernel of ideas a few times, of real thoughtful moments. And so many of these conversations happen again and again and again. And they're all sort of the same, like, prove me wrong conversations. And it's not about anything other than the fact that this conversation is hard to have. When the movie presents, it starts to present itself as it's an idea people had, when everything that's about to happen is about to happen. What do you do? Have one last Christmas together. Seems like an idea worth doing. And tensions are going to come out no matter what. How do they come out? And they're all going to be filtered through people's expectations of what was important to them while they were alive. And if there is going to be a legacy, what do they want it to be? And they don't want to die in anger. And they want to have some peace. But not everybody has the same idea of what peace is. Some people are dissatisfied with their situation, so they're going to want something different. But that something different collides with what is their right to have or expect from somebody else. Those are the ideas worth preserving in this. And I support the idea of having something that has an extremely uncomfortable sense of humor in a situation like this. Because I think that same thing would happen. I think people would have a really strange sense of humor in a situation like that.
Yeah. And I would argue if anyone was going to, the Brits certainly would. They certainly know their gallows humor quite well.
They do indeed.
And I would just add on to what you're saying, Chris. I think one other idea that I really liked that was here was this idea of generational anger of like the kids being like at the parents being angry with them for fucking up the planet and being part of this situation that brought on this apocalypse. I thought that idea had some teeth to it, and I was enjoying those kind of angry moments when they were just like, damn it, I'm going to die, and it's all your fucking fault.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I did like the kids are going to start swearing and the parents are going to be like, that's just not on the list of things I'm thinking about right now. That was interesting. It's not interesting, but I could see, you could see it in the actors, because the actors I do think all are really good. I think some of them were maybe not. It's somebody like Lucy Punch, who is good, and is recognizable, and she's in stuff, but like, who was she? She just sort of seemed like she was there.
Right.
And I know this is all a group of friends, and some friends have different stories in their life, and you have friends and that, these are the people that went off and got married. These are the people who are still living this other kind of life, and they still come together, even if nothing in particular is going on in their life. Not everybody has to have a purpose, but like why she's there, the kinds of, I mean, she's Lucy Punch, but I was going to say the kinds of punches that she has before. I was like, no, I don't want to make that pun, but it's too late. The kinds of punches that her character has seem to be because you cast somebody like her in the role.
Yeah.
And you expected too much of the moment rather than really thinking about what was the depth of what should be happening right now. Like the conversation between her and I can't even fucking remember. But like there was some kind of moment near the middle of the movie where they were talking about the government or something like that, and it didn't land at all. So
about the queen being in her bunker with the dog food.
That was no, I don't know. I'm going to abandon this, but like there's a lot of dead weight.
Yeah, in a movie that's so short, it spends a whole lot of time dicking around.
Yeah, that's sort of the point I'm trying to build to. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think the idea is, if I may be so bold, to build character so that there's some more, so it feels like there's more reason behind the way these people are acting. But I keep going back to this very uncomfortable conversation that Annabelle Wallis, and I don't know what the actor's name is, the guy who she's like secretly in love with, James, the doctor, about why they never got together in college. And yes, I know the world is ending, and it doesn't really, your husband isn't going to realize in 6 hours, because he'll be dead and you'll be dead and everybody will be dead, that you had this conversation. But having this conversation, I mean, her character is sort of made to be callous. That's everybody in this movie has like one personality trait. Her personality trait is that she's callous while she thinks she's being funny. But like, just think about how cruel that conversation is to have in front of your spouse on the last day of your lives. I mean, why did anybody think that was a good idea? And also, why isn't it explained better? I'm still not exactly sure what happened. That she slept with a professor, or he slept with a professor, or
I got lost. Yeah, really quickly.
They literally were throwing around names of characters that weren't in the movie. It's like, well, you had that whole thing with, Tilda. I just made up that name. Well, I didn't make it up, but you know what I mean. And then there was Robert, and it's like, who the fuck are these people? It's like having a conversation with one of your grandparents when they've just gotten past where they just assume that they can say, oh, I went out with Pete and Bob. And you're like, who the fuck are Pete and Bob? Like, I have no idea who these people are.
And then while that's happening, there's a Scrabble board. And I was struggling to figure out what the words being laid out on the Scrabble board had to do with what their conversation was. Like there was this pedo spelled the British way, like pedophile, and then liar. And like, what are you talking about? Also, I lost the thread of who was putting these Scrabble boards. I think it was Lucy Punch's girlfriend.
Yeah, it was Alex, Kirby Hal Baptiste.
Yeah. I think she was the one doing it.
Yeah.
But I didn't know who it was in reference to.
It was just whoever was talking in the room. Like, I forget the specific conversations, but when I was watching it, I feel like they did line up with the action. And I thought it was actually one of the more inspired things I saw in the movie. The idea that somebody was playing their own game of Scrabble and spelling out things that were going on in the room. But I agree. I could see how that would feel weird or hard to figure out, because so much of the conversation is so hard to follow. And especially the moment you were talking about, Dave, where you don't even really understand what happened between these two characters, like why they didn't get together, and then they just quickly abandon it and move on with the movie.
Yeah. I mean, I hesitate to say that this movie should have been longer, but I think maybe if you had, another 20 minutes or so, just getting to know these people, it's kind of like, I can't believe I'm going to compare this to the Seven Samurai, but you know how in the Seven Samurai, like literally the first hour and a half of the movie is just the one samurai trying to recruit 6 other samurai. Mm-hmm. And then the second half of the movie is just a battle. And it's the most amazing movie ever. And what's even more amazing than the battle is the whole thing where the 6 or the 7 guys are just getting together and they're trying to figure out who has what role and how. And it's like, why can't we do something like that? Why can't we establish these people, more, rather than just having them be these really lazy archetypes? The sassy, callous one. Actually, they have 2 sassy, callous ones. Annabelle Wallis and Lucy Punch are both kind of sassy, except Annabelle Wallis is considerably more callous. But, then you have Matthew Good, who's kind of the epitome of the stiff upper lip. And then Rufus Jones, who's Annabelle Wallis's husband. And he's just kind of like, if he were in a Richard Curtis movie, he'd be the guy from Notting Hill who works in finance but doesn't know what he's doing. Right. And then you've got the very serious doctor who's of course an oncologist. And then you've got the American, because you got to have the Americans watch the movie. So you got to throw in an American, Lily Rose Depp. I guess technically she's American, sort of. Anyway, just kind of like Encounter, a lot of pieces that in a better movie would have formed a more coherent puzzle or Scrabble game.
It has a weird amount in common with Encounter, not in terms of what it's about, but in terms of like this, and then hard turn to something that's not really a twist. It's just something new to deal with. And then hard turn back to the resolution, which ends in a cop-out.
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how angry I was. And I knew it was the way they were going over all of the bodies. Mm-hmm. And then they got to Art's family last. And I was just like, and then, okay, they start with Keira Knightley because she's on the right side of the bed. And they're going to go over to Art, who's all the way on the left. And I was just like, and then he's going to open his eyes. And then he did. And I was so angry.
Yeah.
Like, just...
the way they lingered on his body.
Yeah. Just... well, I mean, you get your wish, kid. You get to die alone. So, enjoy being 10 years old with your body turning to mush and no food in the house.
I have a feeling that if you were to like go to the 30, then 60, then obviously 90 is the end. But like it may as well be like a page break. Act 2, this part. Act 1 is them gathering for Christmas dinner. Act 2 is the conversation. They're not even conversations; they're yelling matches. Art doing his bullshit, and then Act 3 is them all getting ready to die. And it's so neat. It's frustrating. I think actually the third act might have been a good like 1-act play. What is everyone gonna do after all this in their final moments? The Matthew Good stuff about having to go, like, he knows that this all doesn't matter. And it's sort of frustrating to him that this is what he's spending his last moments doing. Not sort of. He is really angry.
He's pissed that he has to keep going downstairs, get more soda, get ice, get this, get that.
By the way, that's how 8-year-olds would act.
Yeah. And so like that morning, they're on the PlayStation, like, and they're basically indifferent to it.
Yeah.
And where like Art is just old enough to know that other things should matter.
Right. And they're more concerned about who has more Coke in his glass. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, now that it has ice in it, you'll never get it equal, kids. You're not old enough to know that yet, but ice changes the ratios, motherfucker.
Also, isn't that a thing that like only Americans do that? I know Brits made this movie, but that was surprising to me. Maybe it's made its way over there.
Well, I mean, in this movie's defense, those Cokes were warm right out of the pantry. It's not like they were. It's not how you kind of have that tepid English beer from the tap kind of thing. Like those are warm. Those are warm Cokes. Gross. Well, first of all, Coke, gross. But second,
I do want to say, I do think good actors. I think there were moments that felt real, despite itself, despite the context. I just think the movie is so cheap, and in the way that you mean it, Dave.
Thank you.
I'm fully in favor of using that word in that context.
Cool. I'm in favor of you using it.
I do think so. The actor who plays Art, Roman Griffin Davis, right?
Of course, he has
Jojo Rabbit Kid.
Yeah.
He was good. Everybody was good. It's not their fault,
right?
I want to stress that, including the kids.
Right.
Just when they're doing charades and the day after tomorrow, like no.
That was I when that gag didn't land, I was just like, I can't believe that's just dumb. It's just a dumb idea. Anyway, I'm talked out on this one. Evan, do you have final thoughts?
Not really. No.
Kris, anything else for the faithful listeners who stuck it out to the end?
Well, thank you for joining us. I spent a long time trying to unlock why this didn't work. And
I think you got it.
Prove me wrong is never inspiring cinema.
Yeah.
There's this movie from a while ago called London. Have you ever seen it?
No.
Yes.
Jessica Alba, Chris Evans, pre mega fame Chris Evans, Jason Statham. And he's Chris Evans plays the kind of guy who yells at people, "Tell me why I think I should believe in God. Oh, that's so stupid." It's that kind of stuff for hours. Well, however long the movie is, doing
coke in the bathroom,
like more coke than could fit in the human body. Like if you fill it up in a bag, it would be bigger than your head, and that kind of. It's that somebody who is like, I have a lot to say, so I'll make a movie, but secretly it's because I want to say these other things. And this person, Camille Griffin, is expressing a lot of sympathy for what kids have to endure. And also these adults they're like just old enough that they also couldn't have stopped it if they dropped everything. It's that I thought was the implication, that it was that they inherited this too, and then they had kids who were just old enough to know what's happening to them before they got wiped out. So there's sympathy for people not being guilty for what they inherited, but that somebody else is responsible for them putting them in that situation. Heart's in the right place. Where Encounter, I feel like heart is not in the right place because it doesn't know who it's trying to sympathize with. I do think this movie knows who it's trying to sympathize with.
I also want to add that everything I've read describes this as a comedy horror movie. And it's only a horror movie in the sense that the conceit is horrific, but there's no like blood and guts or, it's not that kind of horror. No. This movie's really not good enough to say that it's a discredit to it, but it's a discredit to it to call it a horror movie because that's going to turn a lot of people off from it, I would think. But
yes, horrific circumstances is not a horror movie.
Exactly. Well, I think that wraps up this episode of Spoiler Piece Theater. Boy, congratulations on tuning in to the episode where we hated everything. So,
yeah, have me back again sometime.
Yeah. So, Kris, I want to say thank you and I'm sorry. So,
I know we didn't know. I said yes to this before any of us had watched any of these movies. Yeah. So I do want to clarify that Dave and Evan didn't set me up to
yeah. It wasn't, we wouldn't willfully waste 2.5 hours of your life. Yeah.
And I did get to watch Total Recall as part of the deal.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, thank you, Kris, for joining us. It's great to have you back, if only for one show. And Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Evan, did you want to say anything to Kris about how wonderful it was that he joined us?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Dave. This has been a lot of fun. I enjoyed talking about these movies, even though they were not good. I think it's a testament to the conversation. Like, it's just like a testament to what Spoiler Piece can do. It's like we can talk about movies that suck and still have good conversations because we can just really dig into why they suck.
Yeah. And I also haven't talked about or thought about movies made this century in countries that still exist in about a year now. Because I'm doing my Soviet movie project, and I just started following the DIFA archives. DIFA was the East German cinema studio, and then they're posting about aspects of East German cinema that are that are interesting. And it's like, what if I just did Eastern Bloc? And that's my thing. So I think that's going to be my thing. And then just remembering that movies still come out.
There are new movies that exist that aren't Russian or East German or whatever.
Yeah. Well, quick recap, everybody. I think it's safe to say that we would not recommend Encounter or Silent Night to anybody. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah. Correct.
Okay.
And I can account for taste. And there's no accounting for taste here.
Okay. And just for if you feel like self-flagellation, Encounter comes out in theaters on December 3rd. That's today. And it comes out on Prime December 10th. And Silent Night comes out on Prime today, December 3rd.
Oh, Silent Night is on AMC Plus, actually.
Oh, AMC Plus. Well, you can watch AMC Plus through Prime. I guess that's what I
Gotcha.
meant. Or you can subscribe to AMC Plus through Prime. Anyway, that's how we felt about those movies. We want to say thank you to our editor, Otto Clamor. Thank you, Otto, for taking the heavy lifting off us each week and making us sound good.
Oh, thank you, Otto. That's wow. Way to go.
Yeah. I mean, you make our voices sound better. I don't know if you do anything about the quality of my work, but that's really not what you're here to do. You're just here to make us more orally pleasing. AURALLY. If I spelled that correctly.
Glad you clarified that.
Yeah. You can find Spoiler Piece Theater anywhere you get podcasts. You can find us on our website, spoilerpiece.com. Our social media is everywhere. We're Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook. We're at Spoiler Piece on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. If you wanted to get in touch with us, send us an email and tell us, dudes, Silent Night is the greatest Christmas horrific presents, whatever presents, as in presents under the tree. I don't know. Movie ever. Spoilerpiece@gmail.com, or you could give us a call.
862-21-PEACE.
Leave us a voicemail and tell us that, frankly, Encounter is totally what would happen if you were having those circumstances that Riz Ahmed's character had. If you really like the show, please rate and review us by going to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. And if you really, really like the show, please consider joining our Patreon. This week, as we have alluded to several times, and I announced at the beginning, we watched Paul Verhoeven's Total Recall and had a super fun conversation about it over on the Patreon page. There's 250, 300. How many back episodes are there? 250 back episodes?
Around 200 or so.
Oh, 200. Okay. That you can listen to for the low, low price of $5 a month, or as much as you want to give us.
Yeah. And Kris is in a bunch of those too.
Yeah, that's right. Kris is in a lot of those episodes. And so that's the show. My name is Dave Riedel. I write about movies. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. And you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd as Dave Sees Movies.
My name is Evan Crean. I'm co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd as Real Recon, and that's real as in film reel.
My name is Kris Jenson. My main thing right now, as I mentioned, is the Russian Guild of Film Critics, top 100 Russian and Soviet films, working off of that list. I am currently writing about the 60s. There's 27 movies, so it'll happen this month. So you can find that on burritoandamovie.com.
It's a great name.
I bought the domain, and then I had the idea, and that was the domain I had, so I went with it. One doesn't line up with the other. But I'm having a great time. The 60s was a really interesting time in world history, in Soviet history, and in Soviet film history. It was the opening up of the 50s, the Khrushchev thaw, then people really start to, blow the lid off of the whole operation, the whole world we live under, the worlds that young people inherited after the war and after de-Stalinization. And then the authorities were like, no, that's too much. But sort of, the cat was out of the bag at that point. And so there's this uncomfortable relationship between rebelliousness and control for basically until the dissolution. So the 60s was this is what this whole project was about, essentially. So you'll be seeing that sometime this month on burritoandamovie.com.
Okay. That sounds like a lot of fun. It truly does. And also your enthusiasm for it has got me excited for it. But anyway, thank you for joining us. We will see you next week, and bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.